Okay. Next question is from Holly. Hi, Rob. I hear a lot of people talk about intermittent It's IF in caps, and we just had fasting, so I was thinking it was intermittent fasting, but she's just saying if in all caps. I hear a lot of people talk about if.
It is intermittent
fasting.
fasting.
Okay.
Yeah. It's worded oddly.
I'm struggling here, people. Okay.
There's a fly, Tony.
What may be stressful for women's hormones?
Intermittent fasting may be stressful for women's hormones.
Potentially causing mood deregulation and or hair loss.
So we need to link to the RV guy, Tony.
Oh,
There's
Tony,
flies in here, Tony.
There are lots of flies in here,
There's lots of flies in here, Tony.
These damn flies. Okay. All right. I hear a lot of people talk about intermittent fasting may be stressful for a woman's hormones, potentially causing mood deregulation and or hair loss. I occasionally eat more carbs to address this, although I'm not sure if I have to if I'm feeling fine. Is there any benefit to scheduled regular increase in carbs for women, and how much are we talking about? What are the circumstances of intermittent fasting being contraindicated?
Okay, so I think we covered a lot of that in the previous question. I think there are laudable characteristics about intermittent fasting, but again, if we're not overeating, if we're eating a largely whole, unprocessed, nutrient-dense diet with the carbohydrate load matched to our individualized personal nutrition, like you can find in the 7-day carb test and Wired to Eat and stuff like that, these things like intermittent fasting or potentially dropping in some ketosis and stuff like that, there might be some benefit, but I really think that we're at the last 5% or the last 3% or something like that. And there is a reality that for women, now this is interesting to me. If you think about the biology of women and the kind of evolutionary biology, women definitely have a more tightly tuned sense of nutrient sensing in their systems. And if they're underfed or overstressed, their likelihood to be fertile is low. Like fertility just gets jettisoned rather quickly, and it's very noticeable in women. And this makes good sense from kind of an evolutionary biology perspective. If you're not in a situation where your body is ready to make a baby, then it kind of pulls it offline and will wait until you are ready. But what's interesting to me about both the intermittent fasting and ketosis, low carb diets, is that when I've looked around at people, say who are successful in glycolytic athletic endeavors like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, MMA, CrossFit, and are also doing a ketogenic diet, the main people that I find are women. So the people who really are dude, this is the bee's knees, it works better than anything else I've ever done, they're women. But then at the same time, I've seen more women broken by doing these types of things than anything else. And I have no idea what's going on there. But observationally, I've seen both ends of the spectrum. And it's honestly a head scratcher for me. In theory, women should be a little bit better at and are physiologically better at mobilizing fat as a primary fuel source. Now, this has never quite manifested in women becoming ultimately better endurance athletes than what we see males performing and whatnot. But in theory, there's kind of a metabolic advantage there with regards to fat mobilization, and which again is one of these benefits of intermittent fasting. It's pushing the metabolic machinery away from kind of a glucose-centric metabolism and more of a fat-centric metabolism. So again, I would just ask the question of, where are you? What are the goals? What are you hoping to achieve with some intermittent fasting? And again, if we have the background of a whole unprocessed, foods-based diet and good sleep and getting some sun on your skin and good community and your guts seem to be pretty healthy, maybe 1 day a week of intermittent fasting is good. It doesn't have to be 6 or 7 days a week. And again, I just don't know that we have anything to hang our hats on that you're going to get something shockingly better from really aggressive intermittent fasting versus just simply avoiding the process of overeating that is easy to do in a modern, processed food environment.
Mm-hmm. All righty.
And another fasting question. Holy smokes, Chris went fasting crazy.
Okay, so these are two questions that we're going to combine in one. So we have Madison saying, what is allowed during a period of fasting? Clear broth, coffee, lemon water, tea, just water, or some combination. And then Carolyn would like a definitive answer as to whether having a coffee in the morning with 1 tablespoon coconut oil and 2 to 3 tablespoons of coconut milk is a good thing or a bad thing whilst doing intermittent fasting and trying to lose weight. Either 16, 8, or 24
Channeling
hours.
her inner Greg Everett with whilst.
Whilst. I usually have one around 7 a.m. and another around 10 a.m. I skip breakfast and eat around 1:30. Does it take me out of fasting mode? And if so, how quickly will I go back into fasting mode, assuming I don't eat anything? Blood ketone tests show that my ketones increase by quite a lot after drinking coffee this way, but is it having a negative impact on weight loss because my body is burning the fat in the coconut oil/milk rather than in my body? There are conflicting reports and opinions, most mainly about bulletproof coffee, and I can't find a definitive answer. What's your take on it? My main goal is improved health as measured by improved sleep and improved cognition, which I'm hoping will translate into weight loss of around another 12 kilos. I've lost 5 kilos so far through keto since mid-January.
Man. Okay, so what haven't we
So first let's address Madison. She's wanting, if you're fasting, what do you have? Just water? Is it okay to have broth?
Again, this stuff really depends. So on the one hand, we have our metabolism kind of slice of the story with regards to what's going on with fasting. And then we also have like the circadian clocks and circadian entrainment, which is kind of another piece of this story. And if you introduce coffee as an example, plain coffee, you are still technically in a fasted metabolic state with regards to I'm going to be accessing body fat for energy. I'm doing some gluconeogenesis in the liver and whatnot. But you are, in fact, turning on some clock genes like in your liver. So is that good or bad? Well, it's not a binary story. And so the definitive answer is kind of a tough thing. It's very kind of context driven. And with the second question, she actually throws out some stuff that narrows this down a little bit more. So will say another piece to this. We know that simply doing a reduced calorie intake mimics a lot of the characteristics of fasting. Again, this is, Walter Longo's fasting mimicking diet. It's kind of almost silly. You're eating food, but yet it's mimicking a fast. It's because you're calorie restricted. And, so it's not a binary on-off kind of deal. There's a sliding scale with this. And a comparatively small meal is going to have a comparatively small impact on the the overall metabolic state and, whether or not we're accessing dietary calories versus stored body fat and what have you. So again, it's a little bit of a context-driven deal. And I feel bad in a way because I feel like I was one of these people, Nikki and I were talking the other day that we did some articles for the Performance Menu, which is a magazine that was an early iteration of the work we did with Greg Everett. And we had articles on intermittent fasting and hormesis and stuff like that back in like 2004, 2005. It's all buried behind a paywall, so virtually nobody knows about this stuff. But I used to geek out and obsess over this stuff, and it's valuable questions. But again, over the course of time, as I've looked at all this, I just keep getting the sense that so long as we're not eating 6 meals a day, so long as we're not overeating, so long as the food is generally nutrient dense and low appropriate glycemic load and everything, I think all this other stuff is really super small return on investment. Like it may be important and it really may not be all that important. I will say this, that if the general goal is fat loss, then focusing on protein intake is really kind of where the rubber hits the road, because it is facilitating the maintenance of lean muscle mass. We want to be lean and strong and jacked. I don't care who you are, if that is your goal. Like if your goal is to be stringy and look like the dude that runs nutritionfacts.org, the vegan doc that literally he looks like if he fell down, he would break every bone in his body like 10 times over. That is not the way that you want to look, like not from a health and longevity kind of perspective. And the thing that facilitates that is a pretty frisky protein intake. And then, if fat loss is the goal, then we use fat and carbs as kind of levers to, affect the type of total caloric load. So we've got a mild calorie deficit. So we're not, completely suffering. But that's really kind of where the rubber hits the road on this stuff. And the introduction of nutrients in something like a bulletproof coffee or what have you, for some people, it's a great option. For other people, it's too many calories. It's not really satiating. I will say this, and again, this is one of those pieces that gets a little bit squirrely. She mentions that she doesn't really do specifically a breakfast. She's doing this kind of bulletproof coffee until about 1:30 p.m. I really like Bill Lagakos's work with regards to circadian entrainment, and he makes a pretty compelling case to do a large meal and a decent amount of carbs early in the day. Now, this doesn't work for everybody. Some people find that, the schedule that Caroline mentions here is definitely of benefit to them, but I've noticed that I feel better with more calories and some carbs earlier in the day, and then I tend to make my last meal pretty low carb for the most part. And for me, I just kind of feel better. I'm more grounded. I don't get into that kind of hyper adrenalized morning state of being both caffeinated and fasted.
So Carolyn is keto. So you're saying, let's say she's doing 25, 30 grams of carbohydrates. She would have, if she were to kind of play with this and just see how it works for her, for breakfast, she would have half of, 15 grams of carbs with breakfast?
Yeah, maybe 15 grams of carbs. But I would make an argument for putting in some protein earlier,
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
Again, because of the fat loss goal. Like, I'm definitely more in that keto gains camp of moderate to high protein. And then, fat is a lever, and ketone levels are really only germane to situations of like chasing specific blood glucose to ketone ratios for neurodegenerative diseases or cancer prevention or something like that. Like for run-of-the-mill weight loss, which I don't want to minimize that significance because it's pretty damn hard to do sometimes, but just kind of a high protein diet facilitates that whole thing pretty nicely.
Got it. So her question is, drinking coffee this way having a negative impact on my weight loss? Potentially. Right? Like, because you want your body to be burning its own body fat instead of...
You do it, and you're burning its own body fat and not burning its own muscle.
Gotcha.
So that's, yeah. And again, like, I'm one of those crazy people that I recommend that folks generally chew their food.
Right.
Just madness. But this is why if you poke around the website, you don't really see... like whey protein recommended on the site. And I think for some people, shakes and whey protein and stuff like that are great. There's definitely application. But working in the gym when we did, I just found that shakes and kind of liquid food, we just did a green smoothie piece, talking about somebody giving themselves kidney failure from doing a massive amount of greens in a green smoothie from oxalate toxicity.
You can find that on the blog.
Yeah, it just went up recently. But we just found that when people ate food and chewed it and swallowed it, that they tended to not overeat and they were satiated and all that type of stuff. So this is one of the challenging features of bulletproof coffee for me, is that it's easy to overdo, and they can be super tasty. You get a bunch of butter and cream and do a little bit of non-nutritive sweeteners in there and some cocoa, and I mean, the stuff tastes pretty amazing, and you can pretty quickly do 1,000 calories of it. Clearly, Caroline is not doing this, but I would still just kind of recommend chew some food, eat some food, eat earlier. If you're going to introduce a fasting window, make the try playing with backloading or front loading the calories and carbs potentially. Now, that said, some people notice that they sleep better and they recover better when they backload the calories and carbs. If that's where you're at, then by all means do that.
Ties back around to we're kind of unique snowflakes after all.
Unfortunately, we are unique snowflakes. Yeah.
So what works for one person might not necessarily work for the next.
Absolutely.
So some self-experimentation is in order there.